This is the Bridgette dress, and as you can see, it is really quite long. Now, I would wear it with a pair of black high-heeled boots, and I measured the height of the boots to try and find a pair of shoes that the heel was the same height and that the heel was on the same angle, because that will change your height all over. And I wanted to try it on with bare legs, because black boots I'm not going to be able to tell where the hem is correct. So that is how long it is. So it's very, very long, and you can see the parts that have dipped down on the bias. You can see the bias part here is really much longer than the rest of the dress. I wanted to probably wear it with this over-dyed denim coat. So, looking at how long the coat is, and remembering that the coat is actually a different length all over, we will be able to see how much longer the dress is than the coat. Now I want the dress to be completely hidden by the coat, so when I'm thinking this is the shortest part of the coat, even in the center front, I need to take up probably 5 centimeters. So now, when I'm looking at the very center front, I can see it's easily hidden by the coat. Now I've got a gauge as to how much I need to take that up. I will start the process. So on with hemming the dress. The first thing I need to do, so I need to make it 5 centimeters shorter. And that's starting with the front, which, mind you, did match perfectly. And that's on both sides of the dress, because the front actually was perfectly even. I think even if I wasn't wearing it with the coat, which of course in springtime I won't be necessarily wearing it with the coat over the top, though it is Melbourne, so who can tell, I would also be taking it up quite a bit because it is quite long. I'm actually measuring my 5 centimeters from my original stitch line. So my original stitch line is right here, and so I'm measuring 5 centimeters from that stitch line. And when I say 5 centimeters, I'm always measuring it with the same thing. I'm not going to look at the ruler and measure 5 centimeters, because the 5 centimeters for this ruler and for, well, they are exactly the same, but depending what measuring instrument you use, you need to be consistent. Over years, tape measures can stretch a bit. So always a good idea to change those over every now and again, so that your measurements are really accurate. And something like the dress front, even if my dress was not perfectly level all the way around, where the two center fronts meet, because it's button up, absolutely has to be perfect. Now I'm going to machine sew those. I've got a new hem edge for the front, which I'm not trimming off yet, but I will cut that off. Just poking out the corner with my purple thing. And what I've found is that this is just a starting point. So my starting point is 9 centimeters. So at the first side seam, I've also measured up 9 centimeters, and this is just a starting point. And as you can see, if I was to make it perfectly straight, It's just a massive amount to take up. Look at the difference, and that's the bias drop. So I'll make this as level as I can. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm pinning down in the very, very lower edge. What you need to get straight is the lower edge and not worry about the fact that this is all bunched up and all pleated up here, because that's going to get trimmed off. I'm just pinning along here, and I'm not cutting anything off yet. Never cutting anything off until you're really happy with it. And if this so happened to be exactly right, which I'm sure it's not going to be, I would then press this edge and hand tack it, or I think it's called hand basting these days, all along the bottom edge, because that's going to be the edge that we're looking for. And the rest of the inside can get trimmed off, bias bound, hand sewed, machine sewed, whatever you want to do. But the most important thing is this bottom edge. Now I do a lot of my hems like this, concentrating on this edge, not this edge. So we're always thinking about this is the edge that we're going to be using. So to try it on, of course, we're going to have to pin up these bits so they don't hang down over the top. And so I'm just making them flat so they don't distort the dress at all when you're trying it on. But you can see the difference that that bias drop has made. It's huge. So now the other part I've got is another side seam. So this is the same thing, just making it as level as possible. Because it's all it is a starting point. Now you might think this is really quite fiddly, but when you don't have anyone else to help you do the hem, this is the way I really have to do it. But as I don't have anyone to help me with the hems, but this is the process I use. And the next thing to do, now that I've got this all pinned up, so this is only being, the top part's only being pinned so that it doesn't hang down over the hem, so it's easy to see if it's actually straight. That's the hem. Let's try it on. Okay, I've got the dress on, and you can see how uneven that is. Like, first of all, I'll do it without the belt done up. So this is without the belt done up, and you can see how much longer those sides still are. But when I do up the belt at the back, which I would do because it sort of feels a bit big without the belt done up, it's still, look how much longer this area here is, and I think that would only grow longer. It's where the pockets are. In fact, both areas where the pockets are. So I suspect the pocket is, because it's got more fabric in it, it's probably slightly heavier on that edge. So I am going to look in the mirror and do some adjusting. Okay, so you can see the hem difference. Look at that. That is hugely different. And I want it the length that it is at the front, all the way around. So I will start taking that up. Now I've pinned some more of that side up. I can see this bit is just dagging down a little bit. So remembering the end game is not how much have we taken up on the inside, but how level is the dress on the outside. And that bit is just looking, oh, okay. What's that? So as you can see, quite a lengthy process in doing this. Once you get one full half done, you can actually make the other half match it. Then you need to put it on again. And I can see that already looks considerably better. I could just hem it on her, but there is a tiny bit too short. So I still think that bit there is shorter. How tight you tie the belt brings the back up. Going to start there, put it back on, and see how we go. Okay, so now I'm just using that new line that I took it up by and pinning it up, and then I'll try it on again. You can see I've changed into my Tzuti robe. So I've taken my clothes on and off all the time. As you can see, very time consuming, but well worth it when you get it all to sit perfectly. Okay, so that's the center back. So we're just doing the one side, remember? So, looks a bit weird, but worth another try on. As you can see, it's actually looking much better. It's a little bit this bit needs to be let down a bit. And that is looking much better. Ooh, is that the center back dipping down? Still, that back is still slightly longer. Well, that's starting to look a little bit better. That bit there. I might give that a press. So what I'll do is press that bottom edge and I'll actually make the other side match. Okay, so now the side that I have got ready, I am going to press. So I'm looking for the center back seam, which is there. So I'm just pressing that very lower edge fractionally more level. So much happier with how smooth and straight that is now. Probably only 4mm or something like that, but still makes a difference because I do like the hems to be straight. So not sure if you can see that, but just underneath this row of pins, just running the iron lightly along it. Now remembering that it's a viscose, so it presses easily, very easily. And with my eye always lining up, thinking I would like that to be, and just like lightly brushing it up because it's really only a tiny bit. Nobody else would notice, but I would notice. And so it's giving us a much straighter line. So just doing a few little tweaky adjustments, I guess you'd call it. And that is where my seam is, I want to match up the seam of the hem. So I've got the seam here and this was over there like that. I want it to be level on it. It's where you're going to start to get a straight hem. So you're not pulling something, I want to say off center, but it's not really center. You're not pulling something from where its actual vertical straight line should sit. And for this dress, it's really going to depend, because it's batwing, the sides of it go up when you put your arms up anyway. It's got a tie belt, so depending how tight you tie the tie belt, and like most people, your weight fluctuates, so sometimes you might have a more pot stomach than other times, and so all of those things are going to make a difference to your hem. It's always something to remember when you're making something that's very bias cut. Now, I've made plenty of other things that are slightly biased. So when I think of the Armadale dress by Style Art, it's actually made of a lot of pattern pieces. So it's got a lot of basically gauze in it. And so those panels, although they come down at an angle like that, there's so many of them, they're only about that far apart when you get down to the bottom part. So it's very easy to straighten the hem in between those, and they're not dropping as much because they've got the stability from the sewn sides of each of those gauze. So it's only something where the panels are actually much larger, or if you made a circle skirt, or if you made a half circle skirt, remembering that part of that's going to be dropping on the bias and part of it is not. So that is why it's really important to take notice of those sort of things, because there's nothing worse than spending all that time sewing something, making it beautiful, only to be disappointed in how it looks when you get it on. And of course, remembering that all this extra fabric that I've got up here, which I should probably cut off soon, is making a difference to the dress as well, because it's all adding weight to it. So the next thing I'm going to do is, oh, I don't like that. That is weird. It needs to get over there. That's better. It has not dropped on the seam edges because they're sewn. So now I'm just hand tacking the bottom pressed edge because I'm fairly happy with the hem levelness overall. Remembering it is a batwing dress, which does seem to be all the rage, but when it's batwing, its height level changes all the time depending how you move your arms. So just going to tack this all the way up to the end and then I'll be back. Okay, so this is where we're up to with the hem on the bias. There's the tacking line on the very bottom edge, and I've trimmed off the fabric and pinned up where I'm going to stitch it. Now there are some tiny little pleats because it is a flared skirt, and this will just help it stay nice and level. So this is where I'm up to. I've got the hand basted or hand tacked. We always call it tacking, and the other sort of tacking was tailor's tacking. So hand tacked, and now the top bit's pinned, and I'll show you the pieces that I cut off the dress so you can see how large some of the pieces are and how different they are. So when you're thinking about what drops on the bias, just trying to get this in shot, this way. You're thinking that if that's a straight part of the dress, look how different the amounts you cut off are. But this dress doesn't even have a waist seam, because if your dress actually has a waist seam, you can start off by measuring from your waist seam down to your skirt edge, and you'd be able to see how much extra you've got on it. So I think I will machine this up because it's such dark fabric that you're not going to be able to see it. But what I will be doing is putting a brand new Microtex needle in my sewing machine so that it's very sharp and very fine, because it's pretty easy to pull the threads on something like this, and you're thinking about when you pull the threads, because a lot of fabric gets the thread pull, but when it's, you know, white on the other side and you pull the threads, you're going to be able to see a white mark. Now I can see it a little bit. If you just see right there, you can see where that is. I mean, that's just an edge that I overlocked. So that's not going to make any difference. The insides that are overlocked will be fine, but any outside stitching really needs to be done on the sewing machine with a very fine, very sharp needle to avoid any of that pulling of the threads. I can see another one there. So I don't want any white coloured marks coming through onto the outside. You can see all of there where the fabric's gotten stressed because it's gone through and not in between. You can see right there where the needle of the overlocker has actually technically damaged the fabric, and that is why I will be using a very sharp brand new needle. And when I did the hand sewing for the hand tacking, I also used a very sharp hand needle. So that's almost finished. I'll come back to you when it's all completed and we can have a look. So when you put your arms up It's going to pull up the sides of the hem anyway, because that's just the nature of batwing. And depending how tight you have the tie is to whether or not, you can see it's higher on the sides when the tie is undone. When you do it up, it levels up. But I could do it up much tighter than that. It's really just to give you a bit of a defined waist in here. That's what that's for. So very, very happy with this dress. And now I can wear it. I'm just going to try it on with the coat. So this is the coat I'll be wearing it with. So even if I did the coat up, which I probably wouldn't, the dress is not longer than the coat. Remembering that the coat is shorter on this, my right hand side, than the left hand side, but it still fully covers the dress. So that ends my take on how I level a bias cut skirt or the skirt part of a dress. It is easier if your dress has an actual waist, because you can measure with a tape measure from the waist down the sides and start to level it out that way. But I still believe that you actually need to have it on to level it, because your hips will make the sides slightly higher, and it's only going to dip down in the part that's on a bias. And you can see from the parts that I showed you that I cut off, very different all over the place. It's only where you've got a panel coming down like that, part of that will be on the bias. And so in a really good world, you would have someone to assist you with doing the hem. That would be the very best way to do it. You stand on a table, they've got a ruler. You can use all different types of rulers. This is a ruler that I have added that's the right way up, that I have added a tape that I received, and I have these tapes all over my sewing tables as well, but this gives me the ability to be able to put this flat on the table surface, someone stand up. That's how I hem my girls' dresses, because they can stand up on the table, but there's no slouching, no leaning forward, no leaning to the side. You must stand directly upright. And I know that the hems of every dress alters when you walk, the way you stand, you know, if you're standing with your hip to one side, all that type of thing. There's no way you can account for everything. But this type of thing, which is typically similar to a yardstick, except a yardstick will have a base. So it has a base and it sits on the floor itself, but it's still very, very difficult to do that yourself, because naturally you have to bend down. You can have a mirror there and you can think, well, it needs to be, 3 inches or needs to be 6.5 centimeters. But if you've got someone else that can pin that up for you, that is absolutely the best way to go. But if all else fails, it's a much longer process to do it yourself, but it is doable. And to me, it makes a really big difference in how much more professional your dress will look. So we don't want things to look homemade. We want them to look handmade. So that's the difference. Everybody have a fabulous week. I hope you enjoyed this. Bye.